MongoDB is one of the hottest database technology right now, and learning it does not need to be complicated. In this beginner-friendly tutorial, we'll explore the basics of CRUD operations using MongoTemplate in Spring Boot. And finally, we'll create REST API to test all this. This is great for getting started. So, let's begin. Let's start from creating a new Spring Boot project. For that, go to this start.spring.io. From here, select the project type as Maven. The language is Java. And for the Spring Boot, always try to use the latest Spring Boot version. At the time of this recording, the latest Spring Boot version is 3.5.6. So I'm going to select it. Then provide this metadata for the group name. This is the domain name in reverse order. In my case, it's com.learn with if taker. Then provide the artifact name. Let's say it is what I can name it. Mongo CRUD API. And for the packaging, give it a jar. And for the Java version, I'm going to use Java version 21. Now add the necessary dependencies. The first dependency that I need, that is Spring Web, and then I need Spring Data MongoDB. We have this couple of options. We need to use this one, this Spring Data MongoDB. Then finally, I would like to validate the REST input. So here I'm going to add validation dependency. So that's all the dependencies that we need right now. Now click on this generate button to generate the project. So our project is generated and download as zip file. Go ahead and open it in your favorite IDE. Here I have opened the project in my IDE. I'm using IntelliJ IDE Ultimate Edition, but you can use any IDE that you want. Here on the left sidebar, you can see the files and folders of this project. Let me first show you this pom.xml file. Here in this pom.xml file, there are the metadata we have defined. Here is the group ID, then this artifact ID, and we scroll down. Here this Java version is provided, and also here is the dependencies that we have added. This one is for Spring Data MongoDB, and then we have these for validation, and finally we have these for the web. Okay, now let's try to start this project. Click on this play icon to start the project, or you can use inside this src main Java. Here we have our main class, and this class we have this main method. Here we can also run the project by clicking this play icon beside this main method, or this play icon beside these class definitions. Okay, now let's start the project by clicking this icon at the top, or alternatively we can use Ctrl+R as a shortcut. Okay, so let's start the project. So here our project is started. Okay, now we'll configure our Spring Boot to connect with this MongoDB. Open the sidebar. Inside our src main resources directory, here we have this application.properties file. Instead of this properties file, I would like to use application.yml. So let's refactor. Let's rename it to YML. Close the sidebar. Here we don't need this thing. Now provide the necessary configuration for connecting with the MongoDB. For that, first we need to provide the URL, that is Spring. Then provide for the YML, we need to provide this colon, and on the next line we need to provide data, and then we need to provide MongoDB, and finally URI. Here take a closer look about this indentation. Okay, so this data is direct children of this Spring, and this one is the direct children of data. So here you need to be careful about the indentation. Without this it will not work. Here provide the URI to connect with MongoDB, that is MongoDB, then colon // localhost, then provide the port, my MongoDB is running on my default port, that is 27017. Then provide the database name. Let's say the database name is CRUD tutorial. That's it. Now here I have not set any username or password to my MongoDB database. So I am using this localhost and this is the URI. And if your Mongo database requires username and password, in that case, this URI would be like this one. That will be the username, then colon, then the password, and finally @. If you set username and password in your MongoDB, then this URL will be like that. So let's revert back to previous settings because I have not set any username and password. And now finally we need to provide another property to mentioning the database name. This will be direct child of this MongoDB. So here MongoDB database, and this is this one, CRUD tutorial. Okay, that's all. Now let's start the project again. So there is no error. And here is mentioned the MongoDB thread successfully connected to the server, and here is the information. So we have successfully connected with the MongoDB. Now it's time to create our models. Model is just a plain Java class, and we will map the model to the collection in the Mongo database. So in our sidebar here in our root package, I am creating a new package. Let's say name it model. Inside this model package, create a new Java class. Let's say name it user. And to map it with the Mongo collection, we need to add annotation document. And here we need to provide the name of the collection. So collection, and here I will say the name of the collection is users. Now for the collection, first we need to provide the ID. It will be private field and type of string and name it ID. This ID will be work as the unique identifier of this collection. If you have any field in your collection with this name ID, then Spring Data Mongo will treat this field as the unique key of your collection. But here I want to be explicit by providing this ID annotation. With that, we make sure that this ID will be our primary key or unique identifier. And with that, we don't have to rely on the defaults of the Spring Data MongoDB. The next property of our user will have name. So it will be private, type is string, and name. Let's add a validation rule, not blank, and provide the message. Name is required. Here I would like to mention one thing. I have a dedicated in-details tutorial on these validations. I will provide a link of that video in the description. Now our next property will be our email address. So private, name, it will be our string, and email. Let's also add validation. First of all, it should not blank, and need to provide the message. Email is required. I also need to make sure this field is type of email. So we can do this using the email annotation. And here provide the message. It is please provide valid, not provide a valid email. And finally, let's make this unique. So provide annotation indexed and set unique to true. So after that, I will add the age of the user. So private, integer, age, and also provide annotation. The minimum age of the user, I want it to be 18 years. So value is 18, and provide the message. Age should be at least 18. Then provide maximum age. It is the value is, let's say it's 100, and provide the message. It will be age should not exceed 100. So there may be some people who is over 100 years old, but they are rare. So I think this maximum value 100 is save. And then I would like to provide the city of the user. So it will be private string and name it city. And that's all the property that we need for our user. Now we need to create our constructor, setter and getter for this user. Right click, then generate. You can also use this command plus n. Let me show you again. Right click, then generate. Here click choose this constructor. From this list I'll select all the field except this ID, because this ID will be generated automatically. So select all other fields and click OK. And also beside this constructor I'll need getter and setter. Generate getter and setter, select all and click OK. So our getter and setter is created. Now it's time to create our service. Our service layer will use MongoTemplate and communicate with the database to do the necessary query. Open the sidebar. Inside this root package, create a new package, name it service. Inside this service, create a new Java class and let's say name it user service. Now we need to mark this user service with service annotation. And in this service, we'll define our necessary method to query the database to do the CRUD operations. First, for that, at the first, I need to inject the MongoTemplate. Let's declare a private field, private, final, then MongoTemplate. It is MongoTemplate. And we can inject this using the constructor. So generate, constructor, select this field MongoTemplate and click OK. So that's how we can inject this MongoTemplate in our user service. And here we'll define couple of methods to do the CRUD operation. Let's say for the first method we'll creating a new user. It will be public and this will return user. We have couple of options. One is from Apache and another user is from Spring Framework. We are not going to use that. We are going to use our own user class that we have defined. So public user, and let's say the name of the method is create user and it accepts user. And in the return statement, it's just simple. We can call MongoTemplate.save and here provide the user that we have received as argument of our create user method. Now let's get all the users from the database. So it will be public and it will be list of users and get all users and it will return MongoTemplate, then find all. Here we need to provide the entity class. That is our user.class. And this time after this method, this time let's get the user by their ID. It will be public method and the return type is optional because this user with that specific ID may not exist in the database. So optional is better option. It will be type user and name it get user by ID and it accepts string ID. And in the return statement, not return statement, first get the user by their ID. So MongoTemplate dot, as this find by ID is widely used and this is very much useful. So Spring Data Mongo already have a special method to query the database and get the data by ID, and that is find by ID. And in this find by ID, the first parameter we need to provide is the ID, and the second parameter we need to tell the entity class. Here you have see the parameter, we need to use ID. Also as a second parameter we need the entity class, that is our user.class, and let's save it to our user variable. And it's time to return this user. Not use this user, it will not work because here the return type is optional. If the user with that ID is not available, then this will return null. So instead of this, we need to return optional, then off, nullable, and here provide the user. And after that, our next method is for updating the user. Public method, it will return user, and the name of the method is update user, and it accepts the ID of the user and the user object itself. This user object, this user object will contain the updated information. Here we need to add the criteria query. So define a query variable, and this equals new query. Inside this construct of this query, we need to provide the criteria. It will be criteria from this Spring Framework data MongoDB dot. Then we need to provide this. Here we need to provide the criteria where it will be ID, because we will query the database with the ID. ID is, and pass the ID, this ID that we get as the parameter, and provide the update query. So update, it will be type update equals new update. Here need the updated properties. You can do this using the set. Then we can provide the name of the property that we are going to update. So name, and this will be user dot get name. Then another property set for email, it will be user dot get email. Another set for age, user dot get age. And for the city, set city, user dot get city. And finally, run this update query. You can run this using MongoTemplate. Then update. Here we have a couple of options. This update, or we can use this update first. I'm going to use that because we need to update the single entry that we are getting as our unique identifier. So update first, and here we need to provide the query, this query here. Then need to provide the update statement, and finally we need to provide the entity class, that is user dot class. Here in the return statement, we will get user by ID and provide the ID here. And if this ID is not found, then or else it will return null. And then it's time to delete the user. So it will be public method. Let's say the return type will be boolean, and delete user. It accepts the ID. And here, the very first, I'm defining the criteria. So our query is equals new query. Inside, we need to provide the criteria dot where, same thing as before, ID is ID. And now in the return statement, MongoTemplate dot, for the deleting, we can use this remove, provide the query and the entity class, that user dot class. And finally, you need to provide get deleted count and check if this is greater than 0. Here we will create a final method to check if the email address, if the entry with the provided email address is exist in the database. It will be public method, return type boolean, and the name is exists by email. It accepts string email. The typo, what will be the name? Here provide the criteria query where query equals new query. Inside this query, we need to provide the criteria dot where we are going to find the user by their email. So in this where, we need to provide the key, that is email, and this is equals email. And now return MongoTemplate dot exist and here provide the query, and as a second parameter provide the entity class, user.class. So that's all for our user service. Now it's time to create our controller that will communicate with this user service, and this user service will communicate with our Mongo template and will query the database and provide the necessary data. Okay, now opening the sidebar, inside this root package create a new Java class, not Java class. Actually first we need to create a package and say the name of the package is controller. Inside this controller package create a new Java class and name it user controller. This user controller will be act as our controller of this application, and here we need to provide the annotation REST controller, and I also like to map a URL, so add another annotation request mapping, and it will be API/users. Now inside this user controller class, at first we need to inject our user service, so declaring a private field final user service, name it user service. Now we need to inject this user service using constructor generate, then select constructor, select our user service and click OK. After that, let's implement our necessary endpoints, and the first one will be for create, and this will be post request, and the URL will be API/users. So here for the post request I need post mapping, and it will be public method returns type response entity, and it will be of type user, and let's name it create user. Here it accepts request body of type user, name this user, and also add another annotation add valid to validate the user. Inside this method, first I will check if the user with the email already exists. Made a spelling mistake. Writing code while talking is really difficult, so I made so many typo here. Then here provide the if statement. If we'll call user service dot exist by email, provide the email using user dot get email, and if this is true, that is if the user is present with this email address, then we'll return a response entity with status code, that is http status dot conflict and build. And if the user with this email address is not exist, then we'll save the user. It will be user service dot create user and password user, and we'll save the return value to user variable. This variable name is conflicting with the method parameter, so let's change this name to saved user, and finally return response entity, then provide the status with http status dot created, and in the body provide the saved user. So with this we'll now able to save the user in our database. After that, it will be our read operation. We'll get all the user, so get mapping, the URL will be API users. So it will be get mapping public response entity, it return list of users, so list user, and name is get all users, and here get all the users using user service dot get all users, and save the return value to user list, and we need to provide the type that is list user. That's it. And finally return response entity dot OK, and let's just use the same pattern. So response entity dot status, it is OK, http status dot OK, and in the body provide the user list. After getting all users, this time it's time to get the user by their ID. So it will be also be a read operation, and it will be get method, and the URL will be API /users / then we'll provide the ID of the user. So here we need to provide a get mapping. We need to provide the path variable / then the ID. You can define the path variable using these curly brackets, and inside this curly bracket we can provide the name of the path variable. So it will be public method response entity of type user, and name is get user by ID. Here to accept this path variable we need another annotation at path variable. It is type string and the name is ID. Here we'll save the user in our user variable, and this will be user service dot get user by ID and provide the ID. If the user is not present, then it will be now. And finally return response entity dot status. Here http status dot OK, and in the body provide the user. And let's check how can we update the data. So it will be the update operation, and it will be put request, and the URL pattern will be API users then ID, but additionally we will also accept the data of the user that we are going to update. So it will be put mapping and the path variable ID. It is public method response entity of type single user, and name is update user. Here it accepts path variable of type string ID, and it also need to accept the request body of type user. Let me move this parameter to other line so that it's become more readable. Then here first we'll check if the user with that ID is exist. If not exist, we'll return user not found. So if not user service dot get user by ID, provide the ID is present. So if the user with this ID is not present, in that case we'll return response entity then status. It will be http status dot not found and build the status. And if the user is present, in that case we'll update the user. So user service dot update user and pass the ID and user that we have received as the request body, and save the user as updated user variable. And in the return statement response entity dot status http status dot OK, and in the body here give our updated user. And finally let's see how we can delete a user from the database. It will be delete method, and the URL will be API users then the ID of the user. So delete mapping, provide the path variable ID and public response entity, a type return string. Actually it will return a message that the user has been deleted or not. The name is delete user. It accepts path variable of type string ID, and here we'll call user service dot delete and provide the ID, and we save the return value to the deleted boolean variable and return. Here we'll check if deleted is true. In that case, the response entity will be response entity dot status. It will be http status dot OK with the body user deleted successfully. Otherwise, the response entity will response entity dot status. It is http status dot internal server error, and body here provide the message unable to delete the user. So that's all for the controller. We have added several methods for creating, getting all the user, updating and deleting. Now let's test the application. Restart this project. So our project is started and this started on port 8080. For testing this REST API, I'm going to use Postman. Let's open that. Here, first I'm going to create a new user, add a new request. It will be type post. Here the URL is localhost, then the port is 8080, then API, then users, and for the request, navigate to this body tab, make sure select this raw and make sure select JSON from this drop down. Here provide the user as a JSON object. Name, say the name is John Doe. Then for the email, it's johndoe@example.com. Then age, think of it's like 30, and finally the city, New York. And with that, if we send the request, here we have this 201 created response. Here in the response we have this user. Now let's verify this in the database. For checking the database, you can use any MongoDB GUI tool, but my IntelliJ idea, as I am using Ultimate Edition, it comes with this database tool. With that, I can use this as a GUI tool for my MongoDB database. So click on this database icon on the right, and then this new data source, search for MongoDB. Here provide the necessary settings. I'm running on this default host and default port. I'm not set any username or password. So for the authentication, I'm giving no auth, and click on this test connection to check if we can connect with the database properly. So it's succeeded. Now click OK to accept these settings. Here you cannot see this OK button because it's outside of my recording area. So I'm clicking that OK. And here we have this database connection in my database tool is showing. And here from this drop down, we have this CRUD tutorial database. Mark this checkbox. Now we have this CRUD tutorial database is showing. Now double click. Now expand this. Currently we have only one collections, that is users. And here is the field that we have defined in our collection. Double click on these users, and here we have this users data that we have saved. Let's change the view to text. Here we have this collection, and in the JSON we have this users data saved. Okay. Now let's create another user. This time let's say the username is Jane Doe, and email is jane.doe@example.com, and her age is 24, and for the city, let's say it's LA. Now if we send another request, here we have another user saved. with this name, Jen Doe, and here is her email address, and this is the ID. Now let's verify this in our database. Here in your database, we have these two data entered. This one is for John and this one is for Jen. So we have these two data saved. Now let's try to get all the users. In the Postman, opening a new request. Now for getting all the users, this will be get request and the URL is localhost, then 8080/API/users. And now if we send the request, here in the response, we have these two users. So our get all users, this API endpoint is working correctly. Now let's try to get this user, John Doe, with ID, this one. Let's copy this ID, open a new tab. This is again get request. The URL is localhost 8080/API/users. Then we need to provide the ID. So paste the ID and send the request. So here we are getting the single user from the database, and this is the user John Doe. Now let's try the update operation. Let's copy this URL, open a new tab. Here for update operation, this will be put request, and here provide the URL, navigate to body, select raw and data type as JSON, and here we need to provide the updated data. Let's navigate to previous tab. Here I'm going to update the information of John Doe. So let's copy this, back to the put request, in the body, paste the data of John Doe. Here I don't need this ID in the body, we have already provided this here, and let's save. The age of John Doe is 35 and update the email address to john.doe. Let's say it's 2 and send the request. So we have 200 in the response, and in the response body we have this updated data with this updated email address and age. And if we check these users by its ID from this previous tab, here in this tab previously we used this ID to get the data of John Doe, and now as we have updated, if we send this request with this ID of John Doe, here we have this updated data. And even if we try to get all the users, and here in the list of the users we have the updated data for the John Doe. Now it's time to test the delete operation. So again, copy this ID. I want to delete the information of John Doe. Copy this ID, open a new tab, and for delete it will be delete request. The URL is localhost, then 8080/API/users, and then provide the ID. And if we send this request now, here we have this message, user deleted successfully, and with the status code 200. And if we verify this in our database, let's refresh this. We have only one user right now, that is Jen Doe. John Doe has successfully deleted. So there we have it. Criteria queries with MongoTemplate gives us incredible flexibility and control over our database operations. Now, I'll be honest. For simple CRUD operations, this approach can feel a bit repetitive with all that boilerplate code. That is where Spring Data Mongo repository comes in handy. They simplify these common operations significantly. If you want to learn how to use repositories for cleaner, faster code, check out the video on the screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.